Good evening, Commanity of Mocharja Galir, Fud na Crinne. It's Misha Anton. Welcome to the Mythical Ireland Library. I'm your host, Anthony Murphy. This is Live Irish Myths, episode number 182. This evening, we are going back to a character we featured more than once on Live Irish Myths. That's Fionn McCool. And we are going to take a dive into a scholarly look at the origins of the character and his story. Sorry, apologies. If you're watching us, we are live streaming simultaneously on Facebook, on the Mythical Ireland Facebook page, and also on the Mythical Ireland YouTube channel. If you're here, do absolutely say hello. I'm just going to pull the blind down because the sun is shining for the first time today after a day of persistent and heavy rain. Hope everybody is keeping well. Fáilte go léir. Do take a seat. Do make yourself comfortable. A little blanket if it's a little bit cold, something for your feet, and absolutely a dram or a brew, whatever your preference might be. A very good evening to Ola Conrad, who's watching from Denmark on YouTube. Hello to you, Ola. You're very welcome to the live stream. I hope we are... I'm only seeing one comment so far. Yes, we usually live stream on a Monday evening. But this episode was postponed from yesterday to today. Hopefully that hasn't or won't cause too many issues. Alan Hoskins is joining us from Ballina, Killaloe. Looking forward to this and also to meeting up on Sunday. Yes, indeed. Michael Pike. Sha Mutasach Ireland. Jigrich Tua August Anton. Brilliant stuff, Michael. Good to hear that you are continuing with the Irish lessons. Kerem Gogus is in the house. Hello there, Kerem. You are very, very welcome, my friend. Rose Corain is saying hi. Jigrich Rose Conasata to Mandy McCurl asks if we're all keeping safe and well. A wet, misty Guy Drech evening on the Isle of Mull. Yes, indeed. Well, the sun has only just come out here in the past few minutes. Hopefully, it's on its way, but it might not get there before nightfall, Mandy. Stephen O'Hara says he's glad to be back. I've been mitching for the last few weeks, but back in Kilkenny now. All settled in for the chat. Brilliant stuff, Stephen, and you're very welcome. And the sound is fine. I remembered to turn on the microphone this time. Adrian O'Beglin is in the house. Adrian, what a pleasure. Hope you're enjoying the reading. Plenty to read too. Elizabeth Champagne is saying good morning. And it's a bleary morning in Vancouver in Canada. Sounds very Irish, Elizabeth. Welcome to the live stream. Rosemary Elliott Mercier is watching from Canterbury in Connecticut. Hello there, Rosemary. Good afternoon to you. Brendan Byrne is in the process of building the Ark. I can test it on the lakes. Yes, indeed. We did have a long dry spell there. And as I always say, the Irish weather certainly makes up for, that lack of rain. It will always come back, sometimes in a single day. Annette Peard is in the house. Can't make Sunday, unfortunately, as will be teenage minding. Should bring them along, Annette. They'd be more than welcome. But if you feel like a break, do pop over for a bit. Sure, you're probably walking distance. Anne McCallum says, hello, Anton and the Mighty Two. I hope everyone is well. It was pouring yesterday in southwestern Ontario, but now it's beautifully sunny and warm. Looking forward to today's story. Glad to hear it. And maybe that's the theme, rain giving way to sunshine, as it is here in the Boyne Valley. Irish Technical Thinker says, greetings, brothers and sisters. Jigrich, Fáilte Roat, Marcus. Peggy Thomas is in northern Idaho in the US. Hello, Peggy. Welcome along. Peter Kennedy is saying a big hello from Ballybrigeen. That's Balbriggan in the county of Dublin. I've been busy with a new puppy recently, so I haven't had much time to catch the live streams. Oh, your puppy will be delighted at the sound of barking, which usually accompanies my readings with Coda and Saskia in the background. Archaeoastronomy Database has had a chance to see the Nebra sky disk at the World of Stonehenge. So excited. Sad, though, that I can't make it over for the get-together with the Tua. Yes, indeed. And I think you had some luck with the total lunar eclipse in the early hours of yesterday morning Irish time. That was completely clouded out here, unfortunately. But congratulations and well done on seeing and capturing that. Katie Brogan says, weather will not be dependable, will it? No, indeed, for Sunday's gathering. We'll say more about that in a moment. Forecast is looking a little bit dodgy. Bloody 9 says hi from Door County, Wisconsin, where it's sunny. Well, come here, spread a little bit of that around the place. If you can spare some, send it across the ocean. Mariana Dunn is saying good evening from Old Town let's try again, Anthony. Old Town Alexandria, Virginia, where I am hanging out. I had the pleasure of hanging out in Virginia, County Cavan yesterday on my way from a tour at Lough Crew. John Main is saying greetings from a warm and sunny, is it Chania, Crete? Oh, very nice, John. I would swap Belmunnet for Crete any day also. Fabulous stuff. Barbara Barney's in the house. Giagwich, Barbara. Annette says, I am walking distance, my regular walk. You never know. I might turn up. Well, we would be delighted with your presence and your company. Salav is in the house. Dáithí Ó, absolutely saturated, crazy, sodden, wet mud Ulster. It might be muddy. Is it mid Ulster? Salav, what a pleasure. Wayne Bird is saying good evening to everyone. Hope everyone's well and frost free. Nice to see the buds of May. Yes, indeed. And the hawthorn bushes in full flower at the moment, quite spectacularly. The full Irish, Gary Giagwich, great and good to another fine day on the sod between thunder showers. Looking forward to the gathering. This will be good. It will be good to see the Tua in person. Yes, indeed. And we did get a chance of a sneak meeting at Ishnok, which was lovely. Excuse me. Christophe, is it Lely? Is saying bonsoir de Brussels, saying hi to all my Irish family in Limerick, Santry, and Swords. Cannot wait to come over to Portmarnock. Brilliant stuff. Christophe, good evening to you. Indira is saying hello from Hollywood. Overcast, misty, light today, like an overexposed photograph. Brilliant. Look, if it's not raining too heavily, that's always a good start. Justificus is Ron McFadden in Los Angeles. Anthony, saw you on the TV show William Shatner, Newgrange. Brilliant. I didn't realize that had been aired, actually. That's great. The Unexplained. Yes. The filming for that was done last autumn. So, wow, it's been shown. That's great news. And looking forward to seeing it myself at some stage. Tom King, the great Smith of the Tua, is in the house. Beautiful bird song here as the sun sets. Very much looking forward to a mighty meetup at Tara. And of course, as we are also looking forward to your company, Tom. And I'm never without something that Tom has beautifully crafted around my neck. Tom, always a pleasure. We had an unplanned synchronistic meeting yesterday. I was on my way to a tour passing through Slane, and there was a man in a van waiting to get out, and I waved him out, and it turned out to be Tom King. What do you think about that? Helena Breen, hello, Helena, Falche, and I hope you are keeping well. Madison Morel is just jumping in, say hello, can't stay for the live today, but I will watch it later when it's posted. Enjoy everyone, brilliant stuff, Madison. Glad to be able to get the opportunity to at least say hello to you. Anya Ryan is looking forward to this and the gathering. Brilliant stuff, Anya. Glad to hear you are attending Sunday's meetup. And I think it was you that filmed the swans in flight at Newgrange, was it? Great stuff, by the way. Great catch. Fantastic. Bernardine is in Maine, where it's 60 Celsius. Sorry, Fahrenheit. And gorgeous. 60. Geez, if it was 60 Celsius, you'd be in trouble. And gorgeous at the Water and Lighthouse. Sounds lovely. Send us a picture. Brilliant stuff. So that's all the comments so far. Yes, indeed. We have 51 viewers. We're good. So just about Sunday, of course, Sunday next, the 22nd of May, is the first, I say first because there may be more official in-person meetup of the Mythical Ireland community, something we have longed to do since the live streams began, which is on the 12th of March 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, certainly the beginning of the pandemic in Ireland. And a wonderful opportunity for us to finally meet and greet and shake hands and have some crack and conversation and, a picnic and a bit of a stroll around the hill. Sounds like it could be a lovely day. Fergal Canton is late. Broner, no Brown Zone, Fergal. You're very, very welcome. Paul Alburl, who's in Alabama, is saying hello. A blessing to see you again. And the feeling is mutual, Paul. You're very, very welcome. Yes, indeed. That was Anya who captured some footage of the swans flying at Newgrange. That's on the Mythical Ireland community page on Facebook if you want to have a look. Sorka Madden is saying hello from Cornwall. A very good evening to you, Sorka. Hope the weather is nice over there. Elizabeth Champagne says, hi there, hello indeed. And lots of people saying hello to other people, which is fabulous. Yes, so Sunday, 2 p.m. Now, I was thinking that we would meet at the banqueting hall on Tara, but a few people said they don't know where that is. That's one of the monuments. That's the linear monument. That's like the archaeologists think it's a cursus monument. We could meet outside Maguire's, the coffee and gift shop, if that's more convenient, and that is on Google Maps. So if you put in Maguire's gift, I think it's Maguire's Gift and Coffee Shop, Hill of Tara, that will take you there. And that's very, of course, the car parks, plural. There's a free car park, which is usually quite stuffed at the weekends. And then there's a paid car park. You have to pay €2 to get out. And that's directly across from Maguire's. So if you're coming in a car, you will be able to get parking, but you may have to pay €2 for it. But that's perfectly okay. Sandra Boothroyd is in the house. Just made it, she says. Evening indeed. Rowan Grove is saying hello from Colorado. Warm today, but it may freeze Friday night. Yeah, is it you that has the tomatoes, Rowan? You may have to bring them indoors for a night or two just to protect them. Brendan is wondering if I managed to negotiate a part in the new Star Trek movie, seeing that you now have connections. William Shatner. Yeah, I wouldn't mind a trip into space, although some of you will have opinions about Jeff Bezos, so let's not go there. I do have tomatoes and plan to bring them in, says Rowan. Well, I have one of my oak saplings is struggling. The rest of them are in full leaf and looking very healthy. There's one that's very small and is only just budding its leaves now. It's a little bit late, so it will need some special care and attention. But the rest, as I say, thriving and doing well. All thanks to the great man that is Tom King. Tonight, we are, as I said, dipping back into the subject of Fionn McCool. I'm reading from a very scholarly work, but a brilliantly written work by a scholar who sadly departed from us a number of years back, none other than the great Dáithí Ó hÓgáin. This is a book called Fionn McCool, Images of the Gaelic Hero, and it's really fabulous. It's an eye-opener. So I love when a scholar doesn't just tell us the stories and when they were written down. A scholar who actually goes deep into the stories and does the comparative work and gives us an insight into other possibilities pertaining to those characters of mythology. In this case, Fionn McCool, we have done the boyhood deeds of Fionn in 2 episodes, actually, because the second one was Rosemary Sutcliffe's version, that very popular book about Fionn McCool that was authored by Rosemary Sutcliffe a number of years ago. We haven't done the depth stuff, so let's go a little bit deeper tonight into that well of plenty where the imbus overflows. Who else? Chungus Khan. Chungus Khan is in the house. Good day, y'all. Jigrich Conasatoshiv. Tommy Gama August Tosafane. You'll be with us in spirit. That's Debbie. Who's Debbie? Deborah Williams. Maybe another time. Yes, I am conscious of the fact that, of course, there are a lot of people in the States and Canada in particular, a lot of Mythical Ireland followers who won't be able to make it there. I am, look, somebody prompt me, John Mayne, Tom King, those close by me, do remind me absolutely to do a live stream, at least one live stream from Tara, And Tom praising Anya for her wonderful capture of the swans. Yes, indeed. Erica Rivertree, Bannockty, Louisville, Kentucky. A very good afternoon to our Kentuckian friends. Erica, always a pleasure. Melanie Corpy is in Georgia in the USA. Melanie, a very good afternoon. Welcome to the live stream. Kathy May Deo is in the house. Hello, Kathy May. Hope you can stay tonight. They seem to work you very hard. Somebody should tell them slavery has been abolished. Tell them you're taking time off, and if you want a signed note from Anthony Murphy, then you shall get one. Anyway. I will read the introduction of the book before. So, as with all these things, I would love to be in a position to read this entire book over a series of episodes. It is brilliant. However, I can't do that for copyright reasons. Under Irish copyright law, there's a clause called fair use. And for the purposes of education, it is perfectly okay to read sections of a work and what would be deemed fair use. But reading the whole thing might be akin to a breach of copyright. And I wouldn't want to put myself in that situation, nor would I want to deprive the publishers of this work of a chance to sell a few copies. Now, this work was published in 1987 by Gillan Macmillan. I'm not sure if it's still available. Actually, 1988 was the year of publication. 1987 was the year when he inscribed his signature on it. He must have finished it in 87 and it was published the year after. But anyway, I happened upon this during the pandemic when I was stocking up the extremely well-stocked library. And I can't remember what I paid for it, secondhand. And a very, very valuable piece of work, it turns out. Did I miss anyone? Everybody saying hello to everyone else, which is brilliant, as always. A wonderful community. To the YouTubers who are watching this afterwards, no, I'm not cutting out the comments. That is all part of the live stream experience and was very valuable to people, especially during the lockdowns and during the pandemic. It was a wonderful way of people feeling that they're part of something. So every week, without fail, somebody comments on one of the Live Irish Myths episodes on YouTube and says, do we have to listen to the greetings and do you have to say hello to everyone? Yes, I do, actually. That is part of the experience. And if you don't like it, it's quite simple. There's two things you can do. You can press the fast forward button or move the slider along to get past the greetings to where the episode begins, or you can go somewhere else. It's really simple, you know? But if you choose to stay, you're very welcome. And as Forrest Gump would say, that's all I have to say about that. Anyway, good evening, good evening, good evening. We shall start. The purpose of this book is to examine the Gaelic lore concerning the hero Fionn McCool from its origins down to recent times. Few characters have held the stage in both literary and oral storytelling for so long, and so it is necessary to trace the development of the tradition and the alterations which it underwent from epoch to epoch. All the more significant stories, themes, and images concerning Fionn are included in the analysis, which thus covers the entire corpus of Fionn narrative. The various strands of the tradition are interconnected and yet can be viewed as distinctive, having survived through extremely long periods. In order to facilitate the identification of various strands, the chapters are arranged in a broadly chronological sequence, and the material is divided into generally phenomenological sections within each chapter. Did you like that? Phenomenological. I actually pronounced it right. First time around. Congratulations, Anthony. Have a biscuit. The intention is to place each item of lore in its historical context by dating, and in its narrative context by deciding its relationship to other aspects of the lore. For a millennium and a half, accounts of Fionn and his adventures have fascinated Irish audiences, and so the material is found in texts belonging to the Irish language at various stages. Old Irish is the term used to designate the form of the language from when it was first committed to writing at the end of the 6th century to the early 10th century. The phase of transformation from then until the 14th century is known as Middle Irish, after which the modern linguistic period begins. And so that will give you a handle on when scholars refer to Old Irish and Middle Irish. The Old Irish, we don't have any extant manuscripts in Old Irish. The Old Irish is extrapolated from the Middle Irish manuscripts. The language did change in that period. From the 6th to the 10th century, it changed then in terms of the surviving material from the 10th to the 14th century. Scottish, Gaelic, and Manx had sprung from Irish just before the literary tradition began, but a very influential learned caste kept the three branches of the language in close relationship to each other by standardized literary and official forms. The full Irish, this is very valuable information. Gary is saying, if anyone needs a lift to Tara on Sunday, I can collect 2 people at the N4/M50 junction or Houston station. Thank you for that, Gary. I do know, I'm aware of 2 or 3 people who do intend to attend the gathering, but are unable to drive, and taxi would be prohibitively expensive. So anybody there who needs a lift from Dublin, there's an offer of a lift. So do get in touch with Gary by private message. Juliet Cunniff says, hi from Detroit, Michigan. I'm new here, but I'm mildly interested in my Irish roots, but I'm quite ignorant of much of it. I don't know if I'll be welcome here because I'm part Serb. Well, we do not. First of all, Juliet, you should know that you're very welcome. Mythical Ireland is a non-political, non-racial, non-nationalistic organization. We don't do any of that. We welcome anybody who has the remotest interest in Irish culture and heritage and mythology and archaeology and history. So you're very, very welcome. And I hope that you enjoy the material that you encounter here. Kathy May gets to be here till 1 p.m. Well, we better move on, Kathy May, because we don't want you to miss anything. As will be seen, it was during the Middle Irish period that the lore of Fionn spread to Scotland and to the Isle of Man. But the divisions of linguistic history do not satisfactorily reflect the full nature of the lore's development. Several items appear as almost identical in quite different textual forms of the language, while there can be great discordance between items of lore within a single period. The problem of such resemblances and discrepancies can only be solved through studying the growth of each particular item. But in general, it can be said that what historians term the Middle Ages was a time of transformation in Gaelic literature and storytelling, as in other European countries. Roger Digan, is it Digan or Digan? I don't know how to pronounce your surname. Tara, we are having a gathering, the first in-person gathering of the Mythical Ireland community since the pandemic began. In fact, the first official gathering of the community on the Hill of Tara at 2 p.m. on Sunday, this next Sunday, the 22nd of May. All are welcome. It's not, it's a non-profit event. No tickets or no money needs to change hands. Just bring a picnic, and also definitely bring some rain gear because the weather is a little bit unpredictable. Thus, it is often found suitable in this book to use the term medieval in discussing the chronology of development. By early medieval is meant the period coinciding with Old Irish, while late medieval refers to the phase of transition from Middle to Modern Irish, i.e. about AD 1150 to AD 1450. The orthographical forms of personal names and place names employed in this book are made to accord with this latter period, which is taken to represent most clarity vis-a-vis ancient and modern morphology because of its medial position. Toponymics are given in Gaelic form when they occur in direct quotation, but in anglicised form elsewhere. The material discussed in the final chapters, and we're not going to get to those, I don't think you'll have to buy the book to get there, represents a new flowering of the whole narrative tradition in free-flowing literary and oral media, that is, in the final 4 centuries before our own time. A new epoch had brought new tastes to the fore, and the fabric of tradition was accordingly being redesigned. To the tellers of tales at all periods, however, and more especially to their listeners, all such historicising of the Fionn tradition was superfluous and without real meaning. Most people believed, as many still do, that Fionn had really lived, but the literati and the annalists never troubled themselves overmuch to provide conclusive proof. Fionn, as a wise man and a great warrior, invited exploitation for social and political purposes. But in the long run, what was most relevant was adventure. Every known story was valued, each idea concerning him and his company, which could be the occasion for new fancies in the mind. And that is the introduction to the wonderful Fionn McCool, Images of the Gaelic Hero by Dáithí Ó, hÓgáin, which we're reading, and timely enough, because Yvette Tillema will undoubtedly want to know what we're reading from. Afraid to comment due to crashing, but joyfully working today. Ah, great. Well, I hope the internet keeps up for the whole episode, Yvette. And don't forget that hopefully an uninterrupted version will be available afterwards. Yes, indeed. Good to see some conversation going on about a lift for Sunday. That's great. Thank you, Gary, for your very kind offer to provide a lift for people from Dublin. That's great. Warrior and Hunter, this is called. Fionn McCool is portrayed in Gaelic. Sorry, I'm completely mistaken. That's chapter 2. It's chapter 1 I'm reading. I apologise. And this is called A Celtic Denizen. Many of the characters who occur in early Irish literature have attributes which lead us to suspect that they were originally deities, or at least preserve characteristics of gods whose identities have been lost in the dim and distant past. Of all these, Fionn is one of the most interesting to study, though also one of the most complicated, for there is no substantial early text completely devoted to our portrayal of him. In terms of anecdotes and individual traditions, however, he is probably the character whom we encounter most often in Old Irish literature. And there's a footnote for that. And that's Zeitschrift. No, that's chapter 2 again, Anthony. Read the footnotes for chapter 1, you silly fool. The sources are enumerated in Cumhaill, 1910, and Murphy, 1953. That's not me, by the way. I wasn't alive in 1953. I wonder what Meyer 1910 is. We may have encountered that. We have read from Kuno Meyer's work. And Meyer 1910 is... what is it? Fiannagecht. Okay, that's one I haven't read. That's obviously about the Fianna. The name and the origin of Fionn. Burr Whelan is in the house. Hello, Burr. Long time no see. You're very welcome to Live Irish Myths this evening. Hope you're well. Maureen Joyce is in the house. Was at the ballot box primary in Lexington, Kentucky. That's a perfectly reasonable excuse for being late, Maureen. No problem at all. I wonder, are you any relation to James of Finnegan's Wake fame and Ulysses? References to this hero and stories about him are found in the literature of the Irish language at all periods. The Old Irish form of his name was Find, F-I-N-D, and the first clear mention of him occurs in a text which may date from the dawn of Irish writing in the 6th century. In translation, this reads, Fionn, Tulcha and Caillte, a tribe of heroes. They shook the fierce sea surface with waves from barks being a type of wooden boat. 3 descendants of Baishkne, a victorious company, best among warriors. 3 descendants of Nuadu Necht, and Nuadu being the deity that we know also as Nechten, also as Elkmar, Nuadu of the silver arm of the famous Cotmoy Chura, for which we have devoted several episodes. Here the outline of Fionn's identity as known to later tradition is already clear. Baishkne was his ancestor, Nuadu the patriarch of the family, Tulcha his half-brother, and Caillte his nephew and faithful comrade. A more strictly genealogical text from the same period again mentions him in association with Baishkne and Nuadu Necht. It further refers to Traenvor, who traditionally was his grandfather, and calls Fionn, quote, the son of Oel, U-M-A-L-L, unquote, or Fair Oel. Down through the ages, in both literature and folklore, this is given generally in its later forms of Oel and Coel as the name of Fionn's father. From these 2 texts, we can conclude that Fionn was, in the 6th and 7th centuries, being portrayed as a historical character. It is also apparent that he was a figure in narrative at that time. Tara Sky Dressler says, one day I'll get to Tara. I was named after the place. Lovely. As was my daughter Tara. I'm in Alberta, Canada. I've never been to Ireland, but my grandparents were from Cork and Kerry. Brilliant. Well, hopefully you'll get the opportunity to come to Ireland before too long. Was 6th century the first written word in Ireland? We believe so, Donna. And of course, again, the monks are largely responsible for that. The bards telling the monks their stories. It'll be interesting to see what develops in terms of the whole discussion about when the Irish language actually bedded down, because the long held view that it bedded down in the Iron Age, i.e. those centuries immediately before and after the birth of Christ, is being challenged now, and is being suggested that in fact the language bedded down in the Bronze Age before that, which is fascinating. The earliest surviving examples of such stories are found in texts of the 8th century, and the variety of these attests to the existence of a thriving corpus of this kind of oral tradition. There can be no doubt but that Fionn was a well-known character in the spoken lore for a considerable period before the language was committed to writing, and that's important. In other words, the lore of Fionn goes back to before the first time that his stories were written down. The historicity of Fionn, however, becomes very doubtful when the evidence is examined. First of all, there are references in early Irish tradition to other characters with similar names, characters with enough similarities to him to make us suspect that they are emanations from the same basic personality. These others are mythical characters. They include an imagined Leinster king called Fionn the Fille, Fionn the poet, and a fictional seer and a judge called Mórhind. This latter name is derived from Mórhind, M-O-R-F-H-I-N-D, which means great Fionn. Wisdom in ancient Irish culture was expressed in the form of poetry and magical knowledge, and as we shall see, these gifts were primary aspects of Fionn's image. It is significant that the epithet Fionn, meaning brightness, was often attached in early Irish literature to wisdom and to the craft of poetry. Furthermore, the name of a character with magical powers in medieval Welsh literature was Gwyn, which name is cognate with Fionn. We will be referring in due course to other seer characters whose names reflect that of Fionn, but for the moment it is sufficient to say that the combination of such references indicates that our hero is a character of great antiquity whose name has been important enough to develop several by-forms in ancient lore. The name Fionn occurs in genealogical god names. It is significant also considering the fact that the names of Celtic deities were often employed in referring to Ireland, that a common poetic appellation for the country was, quote, the land of the three Fions, unquote. Triplication of deities was a noticeable aspect of ancient Irish tradition, as indeed of the tradition of the Celts generally. Given then that the Irish evidence suggests that Fionn was originally a divine figure, we must inquire if any vestiges of him can be traced in continental Celtic sources. And that's fascinating. And of course, in Cormac's glossary, Sanus Cormac, we have reference to Bridget being a triplicate deity. A god named Vindonus was indeed found among the Gauls, and the first element here is cognate with R, Find. This Vindonus was equated by Latin writers with their own Apollo, and dedications to him have been discovered at several wells. There's one, by the way, about a mile and a half up the road from us here. There's a townland called Tubber Finn, which literally means the well of Finn. It might also mean the bright well or the well of wisdom. An apparently more standard form of his name was Vindos, V-I-N-D-O-S, and many places in different parts of Europe have the element vindo contained in their names. Most striking are the many places called Vindobona, the best known of which is Vienna in Austria. This could mean the White Town, but the town of Vindos is a much more likely interpretation. There are many examples of ancient Celtic place names which contain the personal name of a deity as their first element. The Celtic word bona signified a collection of buildings, and we find it joined to personal names in Romanized toponymics such as Augustobona and Iuliobona, obviously the town, or as it were, of Augustus and the town of Julius. So the possibility of Fionn having had so high a profile in antiquity prompts us to ask the questions: what does his name really mean? And what seems to have been his role in primitive Celtic belief? Kathy is saying hi from New Jersey. Hello, Kathy. You're very welcome. I met a gentleman from New Jersey on Slieve na Calia at Lough Crew yesterday and had a nice conversation with him. Fond memories of Princeton in 2019. First time I was ever in the States, I was in New Jersey. Who am I missing? Somebody. Alexander Holmes. I don't see a comment, but anyway, Alexander apparently has joined us. Hello there, Alexander. Hope you are keeping well. The continental, Welsh, and Irish forms, Vindo, Gwyn, and Find, respectively, come from a postulated Celtic word, Vindo, meaning white or bright. This has led some scholars to regard his name as an epithet describing the appearance of the deity. The adjective Vindo, however, derives from the present stem of an Indo-European verb, which covered a range of meaning connected with the process of cognition. Fascinating. Derivatives of this stem are found in several languages of Indo-European origin, denoting wisdom, insight, and discovery. In Irish, these words include fish or fiosh, wisdom, fionna, illumination or revelation, and fionn, white or blonde. This type of terminology suits exactly the image of Fionn himself in the whole corpus of lore concerning him. For in both literature and folklore, he is portrayed as a fair-haired seer who has unique access to mystical knowledge. So, persistent Irish tradition bears out the original connotations of his name in remote antiquity. And the suggestion is that Vindos was, in effect, a personification of wisdom. Excuse me. Indeed, lovely, great, in-depth conversation going on in the chat, which is fabulous. This gives rise to questions about the nature of Celtic myth, and in particular about deities connected with knowledge and the arts. Statues from throughout the ancient Celtic world represent a male figure with 3 heads, and there is good reason for supposing that the image intended in these statues was a god of knowledge. Irish literary tradition has early and recurring references to a group called na trí Dána, literally the 3 gods of art or the 3 gods of knowledge. Not to be confused with Danan, the gods of Danu. Day Dawna, your dawn being your gift or your knowledge. Although these 3 characters have no connection with Fionn in the sources, they do parallel the idea of the 3 Fionns and could well have originally been related to him. A consideration of the general body of evidence for ancient Celtic mythology leads one to the conclusion that the deities were rather an amorphous lot, easily confused with each other due to a common set of ideas concerning the supernatural. Amorphous meaning not really having any particular shape. What real distinction there was between them had principally to do with function, and in that present context, the function we are examining is that of knowledge. Triple-headed and triple-faced figures were used in many cultures to symbolize omniscience, the notion being that full knowledge can be gained by gazing on all sides at once. Interesting. Such simultaneous vision of three different planes accords well with ancient Irish ideas of deep or true knowledge. The poets who were most associated with this could see without effort into past, present, and future. The very word for a poet in Irish, file, F-I-L-E, is related to words which refer to vision and originally had the actual literal meaning of seer. And we've said that on previous episodes, that a poet wasn't just someone who made words rhyme, they were also a seer. It therefore comes as no surprise that Fionn is said in early sources to have had the gift of poetry, and that a character called Fionn File appears, as we have said, as a duplicate of him. Please bear with me for one moment. I need to leave you for a second. That's live TV for you folks. Strong smell of smoke in the house. Turns out my youngest was cooking for himself. May have slightly overcooked, but he's eating it nonetheless. There you go. I do apologize. Several of the continental trichophali have attributes such as a ram, a he-goat, a tortoise as companion, which identify them with the polytechnic Celtic deity whom Latin writers refer to as Mercurius. Such a polytechnic deity appears in Irish tradition with the name Lugh, and the same name survives on the continent in the many toponymics derived from Lugudonon, the fortress of Lugos, or Lugos, pardon me, but in Irish it's L-U-G, but the G is lenited, and later in modern Irish L-U-G-H, which is pronounced Lugh, giving rise to the modern name of County Louth, the county I live in right here, which is actually spelled L-U fada, Lugh, pronounced L-O-O as in the toilet, but Lugh has nothing to do with toilets, I can assure you. These include Leon, Loudon, Leyden, and Lawson. In Ireland, Lugh was the patron of one of the four great festivals of the year, the Harvest Festival of August, Lunasa. As well as a rich portrayal in medieval Irish literature, he also occurs under the form Chlú, L-L-E-U, in British place names and Welsh tradition. There are certain indications that this cult of Lugos was introduced into Ireland and Britain from the continent in the not too remote pagan past. Irish descriptions have him entering the company of the gods, the Tuatha De Danann, in a dramatic but nevertheless belated manner. When the Tuatha De Danann are preparing for the final battle with their demonic foes, I mentioned the Battle of Moytura already, the Fomora, or the Fomorians, Lugh arrives at the last moment to take command of their army. It seems clear also that the name of this festival, Lunasa, replaced an earlier name which appears in the literature in the forms Liha Mish Throan and Brone Throan or Brone Trogan. And I've done a video about that. There's a video on my YouTube channel about Brone Trogan. This word Trogan or Throan is used with the meaning of, quote, the fertile earth, unquote, which accords well with its function as a festival of ripening fruit and crops. And Brone Trogan literally means the fertile earth weeps, or the earth weeps, because although it is bringing forth its plentiful harvest, it will then revert to a barren and lifeless and stale form. If then Lugh is a relative newcomer to Irish myth, where does this leave Fionn? Perhaps we can best approach this question by comparing their nomenclature. The more conventional derivation of Lugh's name connects him with light, such as in Latin lux, Lux, and this leaves him with an image similar to the brightness of Fionn. On the other hand, it has been argued that his name is related to the Celtic word lugio, Lugeo, or luio, meaning oath, and that he may have been a patron of sworn contracts. This would entail the idea that he was a kind of supervisor or divine witness to human affairs. We come close here to the function of Fionn as a seer and repositor of wisdom, except that Lugh's role would be a more specific and social one. And what did I tell you? That Coda would be barking before too long. He's actually sitting up at the chair at the kitchen table. He sits on the chair like a human and puts his paw up on the table, or sometimes the other chair, or sometimes on your shoulder. He just wants you to know that he's your friend, you know? In the same way, the general portrayal of Lugh as patron of skills and trading constitutes a far more practical and social context than the mystical knowledge of Fionn. The only plausible way in which the two could be connected with each other is to regard them as playing different roles which belonged to one original deity. Given the tendency towards diffusion within Celtic myth, this might have been the case. The tricophalic, which literally means three-headed, figures signify the god of knowledge. Apologies, I'll start that sentence again because it appears I misread it. If the tricophalic figures signify the god of knowledge, we would expect them to be closely related to Vindos, and this would not prevent some such figures on the continent from being associated with Mercurius or Lugos. Insofar as one can rely on the evidence of toponymics and dedications left behind them by the continental Celts, however, the distinction between the two appears to have been clear. It might well be that they, in common with other Celtic deities, had their distinctive provenances depending on regional variations between Celtic communities. Their distinctiveness is very clear in insular Celtic tradition. Nowhere in Irish lore are the characters of Lugh and Fionn confused, and this is reflected also by the occurrence of Lluw and Gwyn as quite separate personalities in Welsh literature. There is every reason to believe, therefore, that their cults reached Ireland from different sources and at different stages. If we accept sometime around the 1st century AD for the introduction of Lugh, we must postulate that the cult of Fionn was established in Ireland for a good while prior to that, if we accept. And this subsection is called the influence of Lugh. According to the story of which we have several versions in Irish literature, Lugh led the Tuatha De Danann to victory against the Fomhóra in a mythical battle at Moytura in County Sligo. This story is based on an 8th or 9th century text now lost, which doubtlessly reflects much older tradition. There are two basic levels of plot involved. One is the struggle between two supernatural races, the divine Tuatha Dé and the demonic Fomhóra. This parallels the conflict between the Devas and Asuras in Vedic myth and that between the Aesir and Vanir in Norse myth. So there is reason to regard such a struggle as an antique theme. The second plot inserted into this concerns Lugh and his special foe, Balor. And of course, we recently had a two-part two episodes, which was a reading of Lugh na Bua, Lugh the Deliverer, which concerned a peculiar, a version of that story from County Donegal. On the eve of the battle, Lugh arrives as a stranger at the assembly of the Tuatha Dé and gains admittance. That is at the Hill of Tara, by the way, coincidentally, and gains admittance because he can perform every art and skill. He is entrusted with the command of the army, and when the battle is joined, he uses his magic powers, moving around the enemy host, quote, on one foot and with one eye closed, unquote, while chanting a spell. Finally, he confronts Balor, Balor, spelled here, but often rendered Balor, who has a venomous eye, which, when exposed in battle, can destroy thousands. Lugh casts a stone from his sling and drives the eye back through the tyrant's head, with the result that Balor's own host falls victim to its venom and they are routed. The basic motif here is that Lugh came to the Tuatha Dé Danann in their hour of need and overcame a monstrous foe who possessed destructive power in his eye. We have a story of Fionn which parallels this in a general way. It occurs in a 12th century text, and scholars agree that it is a rather corrupt version of what was then a current folktale. Elaine Dent Lingenfelter is in the house. Hello to you, Elaine. I hope you are keeping well. Welcome to the live stream. The text tells us that when he was 10 years of age, Fionn arrived at the court of the High King at Chower, Tara, for the feast of Samhain, which is in November. The king was desperate, for year on that night, the citadel was burned by an otherworld being called Eilein. This Eilein used to arrive playing magical music which put everyone to sleep, and then used to blow fire from his mouth to affect his purpose. Sounds like a bit like a dragon, some sort of fire breather anyway. Fionn undertook to face the burner and was given a shield and spear and stood on guard. And here's a quote. Before long he heard the magical music, but he placed the sharp point of the spear to his forehead. Eilein was playing his harp to put everybody to sleep as usual, and then he released a blaze of fire from his mouth to burn Chower. Fionn saw that, and he placed his purple-fringed cloak before the blaze and made it fall from the air. When Eilein saw that his magic had been overcome, he turned back towards the otherworld fort of Fionnacha on the top of Mount of Fua, or Sliabh Fua, in the modern-day county of Antrim. Fionn followed him to the cairn of Fionnacha, and as Eilein was passing in by the door of the fort, Fionn put his finger in the cord of his spear and gave it a strong, accurate throw. It struck Eilein high in the back, putting his heart out through his mouth as a dark mass of blood. And that ends the quote. As a result of this feat, Fionn was given command of the Fianna troop. The latter position had accordingly been relinquished by the incumbent commander, who was called Goll, Goll, literally the one-eyed. The text has Goll resigning with good grace, but we must not forget that this is a late and rather worked-up redaction, because wasn't Goll MacMorna one of Fionn's mortal enemies in many of the tales? There are several points of resemblance between these respective stories of Lugh and Fionn. Both of them arrive at a great assembly on the eve of a great event, are given an all-important commission, and play a messianic role in delivering the people from a monstrous being. The spear which Fionn used to keep himself awake and to kill his foe is of relevance here also, for it is believed that Lugh's sling is a substitute, and that a special spear was his proper weapon of triumph over Balor. Furthermore, there are parallels between the hostile beings themselves. It is clear that the imagery has been confused and scattered in the case of Eilein, who does not wreak havoc with his glance, but rather with another magical bodily function, his breath. I know some of you were sinking into the gutter before I finished that sentence. I know I was. I apologize. This is not a farting contest. It is significant, though, that Fionn outdoes a man whose name means one-eyed, and although it is never stated in the old literature that Balor had only one eye, it was a single eye of his which had the baleful power. In one account of the Battle of Moytura, in fact, Lu also killed a leader of the Favora called Gull, and it seems reasonable to assume that this figure was a duplication of Balor. More recent folklore recensions state that Balor was indeed one-eyed, and that the eye withered things and set them on fire. This imagery is quite logical, and it could well be that, in this case, folklore preserves the more logical and more original formulation. Balor would then have been a one-eyed, fiery foe, an embodiment of the sun in its more sinister aspects, which is exactly what I have said and suggested in Island of the Setting Sun and in previous live streams. In Fionn's case, we find the hostile being subdivided into his two constituent functions, the one-eyed Gull and fiery Alliain. The fact that Fionn killed the burner Alliain at the Feast of Samhain is of importance, for that was the Celtic Feast of the Dead, coming as it does at the onset of the winter season. So, if Fionn was understood to have overcome the spirit of winter, why did that spirit reign immediately after its defeat? There is obviously a dichotomy involved here, which can only be explained by supposing that an original Fionn myth was influenced by a myth of some other personage and thereby put out of focus. The confusion can be unravelled if we accept that Fionn was a victor over the world of the dead, and that a harvest myth of Lu was superimposed onto this image. Lunasa, the harvest festival of Lu, has survived in Irish folk custom down to our time. Cue references to that wonderful book, The Festival of Lunasa by Moira MacNeil, which I know some of you have gone to great lengths to acquire, and which is no longer available and is quite costly secondhand. I think it was Erica Rivertree who managed to get the older 2-volume version. And well done on that, Erica. That's a real treasure. All the evidence points to the conclusion that a particular myth was once central to the celebration of the festival, and that this myth related how Lu overcame the burning summer and thus saved the harvest for his people. And we've seen the results of that in recent years, where summer droughts in Ireland can indeed be very destructive to the crops and to the productivity of the harvest. It was accordingly the blazing eye of the sun, personified in Balor, which was being conquered by the advent of autumn. But the drama of this was such that it overshadowed the next great Celtic festival, that of November or Samhain, and the imagery of sun and heat was rather incongruously transferred into the latter context. Excuse me. A desire to, somebody's asking, are there drawings or paintings online that help illustrate these fabulous stories? I could point you in the direction of Lu Nabua and the Second Battle of Moytura, in which our good friend Sean Fitzgerald has provided wonderful illustrations. We talked about that in the previous 2 episodes, but do please make an effort to get your hands on those works. I think you'll be greatly enthralled. A desire to preserve the sun would, of course, have made the borrowing easier, particularly since Fionn's name suggested brightness. But this was not the main reason for the borrowing. for the triumph over fire by Fionn would, in that case, be self-contradictory. We shall see, in later pages, that lore of Fionn opposing fiery figures was well established by the 8th century. So it is clear that this influence from the Lugh myth must have taken place in quite early times. The attempt to determine how early will require some further examination of Lugh's contest with Balor. A striking aspect of the myth, of course, yes, somebody's mentioning Jim Fitzpatrick, the great Irish artist who has created lots of artworks of the figures of Irish mythology. Definitely look up Jim Fitzpatrick's website. And is Mavanway in the house? Yes, indeed. Mavanway, you're very welcome, despite your tardiness, which has been duly noted. I'm putting your name in the book. Mavanway Millward, late. A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. You're very welcome. A striking aspect of the myth is that Balor was, in fact, the grandfather of Lugh. And of course, we discussed this in the previous 2 episodes. Folk tradition relates that it had been prophesied to Balor that a son of his daughter Ethna would kill him. So the tyrant tried to ensure that no man would visit his daughter. I'm wondering if Saskia needs to go out. The warrior Fionn gained access to the maiden, however, and so the prophesied child Lugh was born. Although the prophecy motif is not expressly stated as part of the plot in the medieval literature, it is clear that it was part of the story in its original form. The story, in fact, has several parallels in ancient myths of the Eastern Mediterranean. The best known of these is the myth of Perseus. According to this, an oracle declared that Danae, the daughter of King Acrisius, would give birth to a son who would kill his grandfather. Acrisius had Danae shut up in a tower, or alternatively in an underground apartment. But notwithstanding his precautions, she was made pregnant and had a son, Perseus. Acrisius ordered the mother and child to be exposed on the sea in a chest, but they were rescued. Perseus grew up and performed great feats, and the oracle was fulfilled when he killed his grandfather by accident. Classical writers also relate versions of the story concerning the Persian hero Cyrus and the Babylonian hero Gilgamesh. We have a possible reference to it in a Babylonian inscription dated about 2800 BC. And scholars are of the opinion that the myth lies behind the Exodus account of the birth and youth of Moses. And of course, Moses was placed in a basket on the river, wasn't he? Wow. All of this leads one to believe that the plot structure was circulating from antiquity among the peoples of the Eastern Mediterranean, and that they were accustomed to applying it to some of their greatest heroes. These were crop cultivating peoples, and it is feasible to assume that the Celts borrowed the myth from them and related it to their own harvest god, Lugh. And I'm always asking the question, because this really bugs me, scholars that are just stuck on this notion that all of the Irish myths and their themes and characters were borrowed from those of the classical world and the Mediterranean. And I would say, well, what if the bloody thing was existing all along anyway, completely separately to what was going on in the Eastern Mediterranean? And I do contest, absolutely, that there are, let's say, there is information in mythology pertaining to the Tuatha Dé Danann and the monuments of Brunabonia that I suggest contain information about the monuments that could not have been imported. So the jury is out, and I'm seemingly banging a lonely drum. It was an obvious inference from this that the story in question was being told concerning Lugh among the continental Celts. When his cult was introduced into Ireland, we can postulate that it met with the myth of the conflict between rival sets of supernatural beings associated with the Troan festival, and from this combination resulted in the story of the Battle of Moytura, probably in the early centuries AD. The influence of Lugh on Fionn would occur later still. My argument would be this, and it is perhaps somewhat tenuous, but if you were in attendance at the Bealtaine Fire Festival at Ishnach, I gave a talk which I am intending to re-record for patrons, for Mythical Ireland patrons, at the web address here, patreon.com/Mythical Ireland. And my contention is that the mentions, admittedly few, of an Éanach at Brúna have to be from prehistory, because there is no historical attestation of an Éanach or assembly or gathering or harvest festival at Brúna at any time in the historic period. And my contention is that the late Neolithic monument complex there, which the full context, the full extent of which was revealed in the 2018 drought, indicates that that was a very, very major Éanach site, but one of considerable antiquity. My hypothesis being that mention of the Éanach of Brúna is literally a memory of something that was happening 4,500 years ago, not, as in the case of Taillte, something that was still happening up to the 18th century AD, because Taillte, the Éanach of Teltown, the Éanach of Taillte, had extreme longevity. The claim is that it was established in the Bronze Age, many, many centuries before the Greek Olympic Games, and that it continued, as I say, almost into modern times. The difficulty with the Éanach of Brúna is that we did not have that. We did not have that longevity. There's no mention of an Éanach taking place at Brúna in historic times. Now, how does that relate to Lugh? Well, what I'm saying is that there was a gathering there. The sparse mythology about it would suggest that it was actually a Samhain assembly at Brúna as opposed to the Lunasa assembly that definitely was a thing at Taillte or Teltown. So one was marking the beginning of the harvest and one marking the end of the harvest. Was there a Lugh association with that? Well, we know in mythology that Lugh was in fact conceived at Newgrange that Setanta was conceived at Newgrange, Setanta who later became Cumhaill, by Lugh and by Dáithí. There is a clear association of Lugh with Brúna. Anyway, I digress somewhat. I'm still, as I say, beating this lonely drum. I may be a lone voice in this, but I'm suggesting that no. We've got to get rid of this idea that everything that we have in mythology was borrowed from elsewhere, either by the biblical scholars, the Christian monks, in terms of their own, religious worldview, or in terms of the material that they would have encountered on their travels in Europe. We've got to get round to the notion that some of the Irish myths could actually be of truly great antiquity. Do we have time to read more, or will I leave it there and come back to it? There's plenty to read. Will I read a few more pages? What do you think? Or will I leave it there? It is 9:10. We have been going for an hour. Adele Perth is joining us from down under. Very late indeed. Don't worry, Adele. It's great to see you. And I know that it's very early in the morning there. A very happy Wednesday morning to you. We are normally saying happy Tuesday morning to you, but we're a day late with our. So I'm late actually. In fact, I can't give out to anybody for being late. Sun's gone down. I'll open the blind again. I can't give out to anybody for being late. Yes, I think the consensus is for more. Sneak in. Anthony's putting names in the book. Yes. Excellent. A lot of people calling for more, so I will continue reading for another bit. Why not? Yes, indeed. Victory over a foe is the subsection title here. Medieval Irish literature tells of how a druid called Taig, son of Nuadu, had a beautiful daughter called Murne. The girl was wooed by a warrior called Cumhaill, but her father refused to let him have her. Then Cumhaill carried her off by force and kept her for a year, Tig went to the King of Ireland and had him declare war on Cumhaill. At the Battle of Cumhaill, which is at Castleknock in County Dublin, Castleknock now a majorly developed urban part of the city of Dublin, Cumhaill forces were routed and he himself killed. However, shortly before the battle, he had begotten a child on Murine. When Tig saw that his daughter was pregnant, he intended to kill her, but was restrained by the king, who sent her to Cumhaill relatives for protection. Thus she gave birth to Fionn, the man of good fortune, Fer on Raha. When Fionn grew up, he challenged Tig to single combat or else to pay compensation for Cumhaill death. The grandfather had no choice but to give up his fortress of Alvu, which became Fionn's principal residence, ever after known as the Hill of Allen. Let's not talk about what state that hill is in today, because that would take us in a different direction. Although the earliest recension of this story which we have cannot be older than the 10th century, we can safely say that the kernel of it is much more ancient, for it is obviously patterned on the Lugh myth we have been discussing. A later prose version indeed preserves the basic motif of the myth, that of the prophesied grandson who would displace the current incumbent of power. Tig, we are told, rejected Cumhaill as a son-in-law, quote, because he knew that it would be through him that he would be divided from Alvu, unquote. Moreover, some other references help us to trace the background of the narrative. The man who killed Cumhaill in the Battle of Castleknock, we are told, was Goll, son of Morna. Goll, as we learned earlier, was the one-eyed one, or the one-eyed. Desiree Riley almost forgot to tune in completely. What? I refuse to believe it. I don't believe it. Your name is going in the book. Desiree Riley late by 1 hour and 13 minutes. What penance shall I prescribe for thee? I hope the dogs are well. Coda has been barking on and off. So this story concerning Fionn. Sorry, I appear to have actually skipped a paragraph, for which I apologize. So busy. Embarrassing, Desiree. Sure, look, I'm only having a bit of fun. Giant Oak is late but happy to have caught us. Yes, indeed. Well, you're very, very welcome. Just be on time in future. This is a long-running joke that only I find funny. Everyone else is like, shut up, Anthony, and just welcome them, for God's sake. That the Lugh myth is the ultimate source of this story is underlined by the only detail of the battle which is mentioned, apart from Cumhall's death. According to it, quote, Luchat wounded Goll in his eye, and hence it is that the name Goll attached to him, unquote. A stanza, which seems to be of earlier date, is quoted to the same effect. This describes how Goll's first name was Aed, which means fire, and that Luchat wounded him with a heavy lance. This type of weapon typically belonged to Lugh, and the name Luchat is, in fact, a diminutive variant of Lugh. Fascinating. So this story concerning Fionn contains a direct echo of the combat between Lugh and his fiery-eyed foe, although in a very truncated form. It is also in a quite distorted form, for we are told that Goll then killed Luchat. For such a reversal of the incident to take place would, presumably, require a good passage of time and a complete blurring of the original. Other distortions and accretions also suggest that the borrowing from Lugh, took place at a date long preceding our 10th and 12th century texts. Oh, pardon me. Fergal Canton recognised that was indeed an impression of Victor Meldrew, of the very, in this part of the world, the very well-known TV series comedy One Foot in the Grave, which I think is probably 20 or 25 years ago now. What was the actor's name? Was it Richard Wilson, was it? I don't believe it. He was a grumpy old man. And yes, he got involved in many, many funny, hilarious escapades. Sorry, I lost my place now. The grandfather is a druid and understands the future, all of which must be a development of character based on the original motif of a prophecy or the prophecy. When Fionn does not kill his grandfather, but in a somewhat moderated manner then Fionn does not kill his grandfather, but in a somewhat moderated manner takes his property instead. Finally, the grandfather, Taig, has had his function subdivided with Gall. This latter development is especially interesting, since we have met the same type of duplication in the story of how Fionn saved the citadel of Tara from Ailleen. Obviously, the problem of the influence of the Lugh myth is tied up with the origin of the character Gall, son of Morna himself. Yes, I like that, Alan Hoskins, and I agree. There is a bit of Victor Meldrew in us all. There are several examples in the early literature of single characters being known by both these names, Gull and Aidh, which indicate that solar imagery was operative for a long time. Yes, I am taking margin notes. No, I'm not taking the names of those who are late. There are indications also that this solar imagery spread into tradition from the Lugh myth. In the 7th century biography of St. Patrick, written in Latin by an Irishman, the saint is represented as contending with a champion of paganism called Macoll. This name means son of Cull, C-O-L-L, Cull being an early form of Gull, and the sun idea an accretion. So here we have another Gull character opposing a hero. This man, the biography states, quote, pardon me, I was eating peanuts earlier. Yes, this is live TV. Was a fierce and wicked ruler, so much so that he was named Cyclops. This reference in the patrician lore can be taken to derive from the Lugh myth. And of course, in our exploration of the mythology of St. Patrick, which we did in our live stream on St. Patrick's Day on the 17th of March, I did discuss the idea that some of the imagery, some of the symbolism of the stories of Patrick is obviously borrowed from either and or both Lugh and especially from Fionn. This reference, I read that, in the patrician lore can be taken to derive from the Lugh myth. Lugh's victory over his foe presented a very suitable pattern for an epical description of the triumph of the new Christian religion. And so, in folk tradition, the festival of Lunasa is always said to commemorate the victory of Patrick over a pagan potentate. Well, there you go. But we know that farming was introduced by the people who built the great monuments of Brunabonia and Loch Crew and Sligo, etc., etc., etc. Interesting. The potentate in question is called Crom Dubh in folklore, and of course we've done more than one episode about Crom Dubh. And we are told that he gave the saint the gift of a great cauldron. In the 7th century biography cited above, this potentate is called Daire, suggestive of Daire, D-A-I-G-H-R-E, i.e. flame. The great cauldron was an attribute of the Celtic deity, the Dagda, in his role as patron of agriculture. And so this Daire appears to be an echo of the ancient god of food and plenty. Lugh's opponents The Favore are also represented as agriculturalists. And so we can see the outlines of the harvest myth, which is here reflected in an early Irish Christian source. We have, therefore, two opponents of the archetypal hero as early as the 7th century, with the names Gall and Doire, both of them demonstrably the same personage. The return to the medieval texts, which have, to return to the medieval texts which have Gull, son of Morna, as Fionn's rival, we find that Gull's father is stated to have the additional name of Doire. Again, the evidence suggests that Fionn's original foe was none other than the fiery-eyed one of Lugh, which had become a model for opponents of heroes generally in the Old Irish period. And I'm just going to read to the rest of this page and we shall conclude for today, but plenty more to come on this subject. But in Fionn's case, the foe has become far removed from the harvest myth, which was the real context of Lugh's triumph over the solar deity. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Coda, for your contribution. Yes, indeed. Balor was Lugh's maternal grandfather, and his name originally meant a flash. So it was easy to see why a character called Doire could be synonymous with him. Again, in a text of the early 9th century, the father of Fionn's mother is stated to have been called Doire. The attribution of such a maternal ancestry to Fionn must be somewhat older than this text, the early literature often coupling the name Doire with Jarug, which is the Irish word for red, for characters connected with our hero. And of course, one of Dagda's epithets was Jarug Dirk, meaning red-eyed. Again, in the bricolage of medieval Fionn lore, we find several mentions of characters called Doire Jarug, from which we may assume that in this context, Doire and Jarug were one and the same personage. Our texts describing Fionn's contest with the fiery burner and with the tyrant grandfather belong to the period from the 10th to the 12th centuries, but we must allow for some previous generations of existence for these narratives. So, how far back to the original Lugh source? Question mark. The many traces in nomenclature, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that word correctly, that's the way I've always pronounced it, it's probably wrong, and direct echoes of Lugh, which survive in the Fionn versions, underline the fact that the borrowing occurred in a distinctly Irish setting. The scattered effect of the episodes in the Fionn context, however, suggests a good passage of time before the texts were written. The other characters called Gall, who are referred to in the early sources, were not necessarily exclusive of an embryonic lore, deriving from the Lugh myth, which would be making a particular Gall the opponent of Fionn. This would have been occurring perhaps through the 5th and 6th centuries and would have led to an increasing warrior profile for Fionn. As the Gall figure crystallized into the martial image of Gall, son of Morna, its fiery and tyrannical attributes were discarded and left to form such diffuse characters as the fiery burner of Tara, hÓgáin on the one hand, and the maternal grandfather, Taig or Daire on the other. And there we go. I think that's our lot. The next thing that we have on the agenda is Sunday's meeting, the first of the Mythical Ireland community on the Hill of Tara, where we will have conversation and picnic and tea and coffee and jokes, impressions maybe. Maybe there'll be somebody who will want to sing a song or say a poem or something like that. And after a while, when we've had our fill and we are sated, we will go on a little walking tour of the hill and talk about some of its monuments and some of its myths. I hope to see you all there. I know that I won't see some of you there because you're in different countries. I don't think Adele Perth is going to be there, but Adele, you and I had the pleasure of a tour of Tara on a previous occasion. So put that date in your diary if it, in fact, it already hasn't been there for several months. Next Sunday, 22nd of May, 22nd of Bealtaine, the first meeting of the Mythical Ireland community. Do bring rain gear. The forecast at this stage is very difficult to forecast accurately the Irish weather more than 3 days in advance. The forecast at this stage is a little bit dodgy. There could be some rain, so definitely bring a raincoat and bring an umbrella. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get a nice day. But no matter what kind of day we get, we'll try to have a little bit of fun all the same. Really, really looking forward to that. And as I say, that's the first opportunity we've had, apart from Ishnok, where I did meet several of the Tua, and lots of them from the States, from the West Coast in particular. I had the West Coast following at my talk. Really, really looking forward to meeting. And we'll do a live stream for those of you who aren't able to be there, and we'll try to do some introductions and point the camera in people's faces and say hello to Anne McCallum and, you know, Elaine Dent, Lingenfelter, and all of those who are watching from afar. Yes, indeed. And this, I think you'll agree, is a wonderful piece of work. I hope that some of you will at least have an interest in obtaining your own copy of it. I haven't actually ever read the whole lot, but I do intend to. hÓgáin was the author of that great encyclopedia of Irish lore, which I have, myth, legend, and romance, of which I have the 2 issues. It was reissued later as a smaller in dimension pages publication, but thicker, the same material. Fabulous stuff. Desiree will be watching from Louisiana with family. We're coming out to Colorado to visit. Brilliant. That sounds fabulous. Excellent. And Alexandra is wishing that there may not be a cloud in the sky. Let's keep that hope close to our hearts. I would love to be there, says Adele. Maybe next time. Yes, indeed. And of course, all going well, this is the first of hopefully several gatherings of the Tua. Katie Brogan is looking forward to the live stream. Yes, indeed. 2 p.m. Irish time on the Hill of Tara is when we're gathering. Not sure about a live stream. Like, we'll probably do that. I suspect we'll be there for several hours. I haven't put a finishing time on it. I suspect some people will hang around for hours and hours. But I would say sometime between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. we'd probably live stream. So take 5 hours off that for the East Coast is what, 9 a.m. 6 a.m. for the Pacific. So we'll try and do that at around maybe 3 or 4 p.m. So it's not just quite so early in the morning for the West Coasters, you know. In the car park, well, we're actually, the plan is to have some sort of a gathering and a picnic at the banqueting hall, Teach Mí Chuairte. But the most convenient meeting place would appear to be at Maguire's, which is the coffee shop and gift shop on the Hill of Tara. We can meet somewhere out the front there. How do you spell the character Goll? It's Goll, Goll. All the time. Will the time be posted on Facebook? It has already been. The starting time is 2 p.m. We'll try to give a little bit of a heads up for the live stream, but basically, if you're in the States, you'll be hopefully waiting. It will appear on Facebook. Don't think I can live stream without bringing a computer on both Facebook and YouTube. So the live stream will probably be only on the Facebook page. And of course, it'll be available to view afterwards because these things are automatically saved. In the meantime, I hope you all have a great evening or a great afternoon or a great morning, depending on where you are in the world. Have a great day. And I'll see some of you on Sunday. We'll see the rest of you next Monday when we will return to the usual time slot of 8 p.m. Monday for the next part of our adventure into the character of Fionn McCool and its origins. In the meantime, as I say, just to reiterate, if you want to support Mythical Ireland, please consider becoming a patron. Patrons get access to material such as photographs, videos, blog posts and articles, podcasts, recordings, and at the upper levels, merchandise, which isn't ordinarily available to those on the regular social media channels. And I would appreciate your support. In the meantime, go easy. Slongafol, Togabugay. Oh, I got that wrong, didn't I? Ikoa, Slongafol, Kolosov. If you're going to bed, have a good sleep. If you're not, stay awake. And most importantly, Togabugay, which means take it easy. Until next time, Slongafol, Macarjigalair.